On a blustery gray morning in March 2018, the air outside auto factories across North America felt heavy with anticipation. Workers arrived bundled against the wind, unaware that the day would mark a turning point for their industry and their livelihoods. That morning, President Trump appeared on television screens nationwide, announcing sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The decision was abrupt, catching many off guard. News anchors scrambled to explain the implications, while workers gathered in break rooms, eyes glued to the screens, trying to make sense of what this would mean for their jobs and their families. As the news spread, factories and workers in both the United States and Canada woke up to a new reality. The announcement rippled through the auto industry, sparking confusion, anxiety, and urgent conversations on factory floors and in union halls. The tariffs hit car makers hard, threatening to upend carefully balanced supply chains. For many workers, the sense of security they once felt was suddenly replaced by uncertainty. Steel and aluminum are the backbone of the auto industry, essential for building everything from the frame to the engine. Car companies scrambled to assess the impact, holding emergency meetings and consulting with suppliers to understand how much costs would rise. Almost overnight, automakers faced a daunting challenge. They had to figure out how to pay significantly more for the metals they needed. Some factories, unable to absorb the sudden spike in costs, halted production lines, sending workers home early and leaving machinery idle. Others rushed to stockpile as much steel and aluminum as possible before prices climbed even higher, hoping to buy time and keep assembly lines running. Warehouses filled with metal, and forklifts worked overtime to move supplies. The news sent shockwaves from Detroit, the heart of America's auto industry, across the border to Windsor, Canada, where thousands of workers also depended on the flow of affordable materials. The tariffs mattered because they changed the cost of making cars overnight. Production managers pored over spreadsheets, recalculating budgets and trying to predict how much more each vehicle would cost to build. Trucks, SUVs, and sedans all became more expensive to manufacture. Every model, from the most affordable compact to the largest pickup, was affected. The price increases threatened to ripple out to dealerships and ultimately to consumers. For many workers, this was just the start of a long and painful journey. The uncertainty weighed heavily on their minds as they left the factory floor, wondering what the future would hold for themselves, their families, and the communities built around these plants. In the heart of Oshawa, Canada, assembly line worker Maria Torres stood beside the humming machinery, her hands trembling slightly as she checked her phone during a short break. The factory floor was alive with the usual clatter and whir of production, but Maria's mind was elsewhere, clouded by a sense of unease that had become all too familiar in recent months. She scrolled through her messages and news alerts, her eyes catching headlines about possible layoffs and rumors of plant closures. Each notification seemed to bring a fresh wave of anxiety as uncertainty about the future loomed over her and her co-workers. "My husband and I both work at the plant," Maria confided to a friend. "If it closes, we lose everything. Our jobs, our home, our sense of security. We've built our lives around this place." The thought of both incomes disappearing overnight was almost too much to bear. Stories like Maria's echoed across the border, resonating with workers in factories from Ontario to Michigan. The fear was not isolated, it was shared by thousands of families whose livelihoods depended on the steady rhythm of the assembly line. In Michigan, veteran worker Joe Kent faced similar fears. With over 30 years on the line, he had seen the industry's ups and downs, but this time felt different. More uncertain, more precarious. "We built cars here for generations," Joe said, his voice heavy with concern. "Now every week there are new rules, new rumors, new threats to our jobs. It's like walking on thin ice, never knowing when it might crack beneath your feet." Many workers gathered in break rooms and at shift changes, whispering about the latest updates, unsure if their jobs would survive the next round of cuts. The uncertainty was palpable, hanging in the air like a thick fog. Union leaders did their best to reassure their members, holding meetings and promising to fight for every job. They spoke of solidarity and hope, urging workers to stand together in the face of adversity. But with each new announcement about tariffs or sudden policy changes, hope seemed to fade a little more. The global economy felt unpredictable, and every headline brought fresh worries about what tomorrow might bring. For every worker like Maria or Joe, there were hundreds more facing the same uncertainty. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to the auto industry, now left wondering if their hard work would be enough to see them through. Even managers and supervisors felt the pressure mounting, They were tasked with making impossible decisions, balancing the needs of the company with the well-being of their teams. In tense meetings behind closed doors, they pored over staffing lists, agonizing over who would stay and who would be let go. The weight of these choices kept them up at night, knowing each decision affected not just workers but entire families. It was a time of anxiety, worry, and sleepless nights for everyone in the auto business. The uncertainty touched every corner of the factory, from the assembly line to the manager's office, uniting all in a shared struggle to hold on to hope in the face of an uncertain future. Before the trade war, car parts moved easily across North America's borders. The flow of goods was almost seamless, with trucks carrying everything from engines to tiny electronic sensors, zipping back and forth between factories in the US, Canada, and Mexico. The auto industry relied on this smooth movement, with supply chains stretching across thousands of miles but operating like a well-oiled machine. A single car could cross the US-Canada or US-Mexico border multiple times before it was finished. Parts would be assembled in one country, shipped to another for further work, and then sent back again for final assembly. This cross-border dance was essential for keeping costs down and production efficient. But the new tariffs brought new paperwork and inspections. Suddenly, every shipment needed extra documentation, and customs officers had to check and double-check every load. What used to be a quick process now became a bureaucratic nightmare, with forms piling up and confusion at every step. Truck drivers spent hours waiting at border crossings. Instead of making deliveries on time, they found themselves stuck in endless lines, sometimes for an entire day. The frustration was palpable as drivers watched their schedules slip away and their trucks sit idle. A simple shipment of bumpers or engines could be held up for days. Even the smallest delay could ripple through the supply chain, causing headaches for everyone involved. Warehouses filled up with parts that couldn't move, and factories waited anxiously for the components they needed. "It's a mess," said one logistics manager in Detroit. Every day brought new challenges, with shipments delayed, paperwork lost, and customers demanding answers. The stress was constant, and the pressure to keep things moving was higher than ever. "We're drowning in forms, and every delay costs money." The mountain of paperwork grew taller by the week, and every extra hour spent on compliance meant less time for actual work. The cost of doing business was rising fast, and there seemed to be no end in sight. Some small suppliers struggled to survive. Unlike big companies, they didn't have teams of lawyers or compliance experts. For them, every new rule was a potential disaster, threatening to push them out of business entirely. They couldn't afford the extra staff needed to handle the paperwork. With only a handful of employees, the burden of compliance fell on everyone, stretching resources thin and leaving little time for anything else. Car assembly lines sometimes shut down, waiting for parts stuck on the wrong side of the border. Workers stood idle, machines sat silent, and the cost of lost production mounted with every passing hour. The delays meant missed deadlines. Automakers scrambled to reschedule deliveries, but the uncertainty made planning nearly impossible. Each missed deadline meant penalties, lost contracts, and unhappy customers. Dealers had fewer cars to sell. Showrooms that once bustled with new models now looked empty, and salespeople struggled to meet their quotas. The shortage of vehicles drove up prices and left customers frustrated. Buyers had to wait longer and pay more. The dream of driving home a new car turned into a waiting game, with prices climbing higher as inventory dwindled. For many, the excitement of buying a car was replaced by disappointment and sticker shock. The border, once a symbol of easy trade, became a bottleneck choking the industry. What was once a highway of opportunity had turned into a wall of red tape, slowing progress and threatening the future of North America's auto industry. As tariffs made cars more expensive, dealers found it harder to sell them. Unsold vehicles started piling up in massive parking lots outside factories in Michigan and Ontario. To some, it looked like a crisis, but for others, it was a business opportunity. Companies sprang up to store unsellable cars. They charged automakers by the day. "We never thought we'd make money this way," said one lot manager, "but now, these cars are our goldmine." Investors also saw a chance to profit. Some bought up unsold inventory, hoping prices would rise. Others rented space to automakers desperate for somewhere to keep their overflow. While workers worried about their jobs, these businesses quietly thrived. The chaos of the trade war made winners and losers in unexpected places. To avoid tariffs, many car makers started moving production to Mexico. Wages were lower there, and new trade rules made it easier to export cars back to the United States without paying as much in tariffs. Factories in Mexican cities like Monterrey and Saltillo grew quickly. "We're hiring every week," said a plant supervisor. "The work is coming here because it's cheaper and easier." This shift hurt towns in the United States and Canada. Plants closed, communities lost their main source of jobs, but for Mexican workers, it was a chance at a better life. Managers had to learn new rules and work with new partners. The move south was a gamble, but for many companies, it was the only way to survive the trade war. As production moved to Mexico, a new trend took hold: electric vehicles, or EVs. Global demand for cleaner cars was rising. Mexican factories started building more EVs, batteries, and green car parts. Government incentives in Mexico really helped. One Mexican trade official even said, "We want to be the EV capital of North America." New plants opened to make batteries and lightweight frames. Big car companies invested billions in Mexican EV plants. Workers learned new skills, and some engineers moved south to help out. The country's auto industry changed almost overnight. Mexico's EV boom brought hope and pride. It also changed the balance of power in North America's car business, as the future of autos shifted south. Back in Michigan, families like the Kents had to make some tough choices. With fewer paychecks coming in, they cut back on spending. Joe Kent put it simply, "We used to go out to eat every Friday. Now it's once a month." Car prices kept rising. For buyers, a new truck or SUV cost thousands more than before. One young couple in Windsor said, "We saved for 2 years, but now we can't afford the car we want." Some families moved away, hoping to find jobs in other industries. Children changed schools. Communities shrank as people left in search of better lives. The trade war's effects were everywhere, in empty factories, in crowded food banks, and in the dreams of families struggling to adapt. Car companies had to change how they did business. Some invested in automation to cut costs. Others formed new partnerships across borders. The old ways of making and selling cars just didn't work anymore. Workers learned new skills, hoping to stay employed. Training programs popped up, teaching everything from robotics to EV battery assembly. As one union leader put it, "It's not easy, but we have to adapt." Dealers started selling more used cars, as buyers looked for cheaper options. Repair shops got busier, fixing older vehicles that people could no longer afford to replace. The auto industry became leaner, tougher, and more focused on the future, but not everyone could keep up with the pace of change. The trade war changed North America's car industry for good. Some towns lost everything, while others found new hope in electric cars and fresh investment. The border was no longer just a line, it was a wall, a gate, and sometimes a lifeline. Families, workers, and managers all learned hard lessons. They watched as old jobs vanished and new ones appeared in unexpected places. The future of cars in North America will be shaped by tariffs, technology, and the choices people make every day. The turmoil isn't over, but the drive for survival, innovation, and progress continues. As the dust settles, the auto industry, and the people who depend on it, must keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles ahead.